Antarctica, the end of the world where ice reigns supreme. Darkness envelops this continent for much of the year, and even in summer the sun glides low, casting long shadows over endless white horizons, and the silence breathes with tales of ancient mysteries. Before I set off on this once-in-a-lifetime adventure, I had no doubt that Antarctica would be fantastic. I did have my reservations though. I wondered whether on a group tour I would be able to find the space to capture the poetry such as the lines with which I open this video. I also had another, more mundane question. Photographers who know me joke that I never go anywhere without a tripod, and I wasn't sure whether this kind of trip would lend itself to slow, locked-down, tripod-based photography. But I decided to run the test, and never doing things by halves, I packed 3. Already by the first evening on the Beagle Channel, I had resorted to shooting handheld, but I was still determined to answer my question. Should you as a landscape photographer bring a tripod with you on your journey to Antarctica? There is a huge amount of build-up to an experience like this. We had already travelled for 38 hours from the UK to the very south of Argentina, and we stayed in a hotel in Ushuaia for a further 2 nights. Luckily for us, our crossing of the Drake Passage had not been too rough, but by the morning of the second day on board ship, I was more than ready to lay eyes on our destination. It's our second day crossing the Drake Passage, and I'm absolutely exhausted. The anticipation, waiting for something to happen, is almost too much. The tour leaders have been fantastic. They've put on talks ranging from the geology of Antarctica, the history, wildlife, photography. It's been really interesting, but I am really looking forward to getting to our destination now. Talking of which, we should start to spy some icebergs by sometime in the afternoon, and we will see the continent itself before the day is out. If I'm really lucky and the weather holds up, I might even be camping on Antarctica this evening. Fingers crossed. I've had a bit of everything on this crossing. The weather has been very changeable, obviously, and the tide has been such that it's created quite a lot of turbulence at certain times. I think people were feeling pretty rough around the edges on the first day, especially yesterday. I took some seasickness tablets, which just made me really drowsy. Didn't really want to do too much yesterday, was so lethargic, but feeling much better today. Raring to go. Ooh, where's my room? Just here. So I underestimated it a little bit. We have arrived and it's only about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and we're already in Antarctica. Spotted an iceberg really early on, probably about 9 in the morning, and yeah, we're just approaching the continent, and we are going to do a Zodiac ride this evening. Camping's tomorrow night, but yeah, super excited.
spent the rest of the afternoon taking in this magical landscape, bird watching, spotting our first whales, and enjoying the aquamarine blue of icebergs as we sailed past. We'd been gifted with a beautiful blue, almost cloudless day, and as sunset approached, the expedition team made ready for our first Zodiac excursion. That was quite an introduction to Antarctica. Although I worry sometimes that filming takes me away from experiencing in full the moment with all its weight, I am glad I have this kind of footage to look back over and marvel at just how special this place is. The sunset that evening just kept on giving, and the blue hour Alpine glow carried on well into the night. As you can see, this trip allowed me to take some videos of my own. I'm not here on a jolly. My friend Burnham works here.
Team Leather Seal? Yeah, Team Leather Seal.
And he brought me along as a second shooter to make a film for his company, Swoop Adventures, and the cruise company, Polar Latitudes. The next day we were back on the Zodiac early, doing what we came to do. We were here to film the Citizen Science Programme. Contributors to the Citizen Science Programme monitor ice algae, do bird counts, help NASA with cloud surveys, and upload pictures of whale tails, or flukes, to Happy Whale, a database which identifies individuals from their markings and tracks them around the globe. This day we were filming the participants collecting samples to help scientists obtain a seasonal picture of phytoplankton abundance, composition, and distribution. They also dropped a Secchi disc to check for water turbidity. As I would discover quickly, expedition cruises are one long blast of FOMO. Of course you see a whole lot, but whatever choices you make, you are missing something. And every few hours you get to endure the stories of close encounters, often on a Zodiac that you could have been on. However, this time the Citizen Science boat got the bragging rights, and we were treated to quite a show. This was our first of many encounters with whales during our adventures, but perhaps this was the most impactful. And now, a few months on, the sounds of humpbacks spouting backlit spray into the cold morning air is one of the moments that has stuck with me most. After our introduction to Antarctica, the experiences came thick and fast, and that afternoon we got to have our first landing. The Zodiacs took us in on a spectacular approach to Cuvier Island to see a gentoo penguin colony. However, there's no pleasing a landscape photographer, and as the blue sky weather continued, I was starting to wonder whether I had made a miscalculation in bringing a tripod, let alone 3.
So one of the questions that I wanted to answer for myself on coming to Antarctica was whether it was good for shooting with a tripod. And today is about as blue sky a day as you can possibly imagine. We're out at a penguin colony, and it's really nice to experience it. The atmosphere is amazing with the sounds of them all around, and the feathers, the down from the fledgling chicks which are molting, blowing all around us, but definitely not great for slow, considered, tripod-based photography. It's much more run and gun, using a 200 to 600 that I borrowed from a friend, and getting some nice images. The dynamic range is a challenge. It's pretty much black on white, so really nice experience, but so far nothing that I wanted to set up a tripod for. And there's these real strict markers of where you're supposed to go that the expedition guides lay out for you. So there's no going close to the shoreline and picking out some interesting foreground rocks with icebergs in the background. It's not that sort of shooting experience. I am camping later today on the continent, so that might be quite different because we've got permission to film there, and as long as I don't wander off too far, I can pick my way along the coastline and hopefully set up some nice long exposure blue out shots. Really looking forward to it.
We filmed a few segments for the Citizen Science video, and then we picked our way around the shoreline, enjoying the sounds of the penguins and the whale bones that littered the beach. Overall, I'm glad I focused on filming over photography during this first visit to land. Wildlife photography is a real skill, and it takes practice, patience, and a bit of good fortune to produce anything really special. Video is a little different. A moving picture allows you to cheat somewhat and convey the dynamism of the animals in this pristine environment without the need to be quite so thoughtful and precise in composition. My still photos of the penguins were nothing special. While the light at this latitude is slightly diffuse, there was still a lot of contrast, and as someone who likes shooting at late blue hour, I felt like a fish out of water. I was nonetheless happy to get some environmental images of wildlife, but if I ever returned to Antarctica, I would take a 70-200. I found the 200mm minimum of the lens I was carrying a little limiting to compose for the landscape with animals as a foreground interest. Also, the 200-600 is a heavy lens, and I had to bump the ISO right up to get the shutter speed and depth of field that I needed, even with image stabilization turned on. My desire to break out the tripod and do some measured landscape photography had built to an almost intolerable degree. However, the incredible experiences stacked up fast, and they had already begun to blur into one. Barely 2 hours after returning to the ship for dinner, we had been briefed and were boarding the Zodiacs to camp on the ice. To give you some sense of how cold this night was going to be, the sea was freezing over as we glided towards our campsite. The sun was already setting as we made our approach to Kerr Point, and I was eager to set up my bivvy quickly, and then find a stretch of snow that didn't have footprints on it. I was also interested in the whale bones we'd landed by, and I wondered whether they would make a good foreground interest.
Coming to investigate. So we are all set up for camping on Antarctica. You might be able to tell the light has completely faded. I've spent the last 2.5 hours shooting down by the shore here. Well, everyone has actually. And that's one of the problems with a group tour like this. Everyone's on top of each other, footprints through the snow. It's really hard to get a compelling composition. We're also limited as to where we can walk, and I've been very selective about my compositions. I've been using these whale bones and the penguins in the midground and the icebergs in the background as compositional devices, and that's worked really well for me. Just checked, and that camera wasn't auto-focusing in the poor light, so I thought I'd finish the piece to camera as a handhold with some selfie illumination. It has been a little bit challenging shooting on this landing. Oh, that moon is just beautiful. Has been a little bit challenging. Obviously there are people everywhere, they're doing their own thing, and that's what a group tour is like. You've also got the wildlife moving in and out, so you have to be very cognizant of that. But there are also the icebergs in the bay, and that's its own difficulty with long exposures. As soon as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, the movement of the ice became very obvious, and actually ruined a fair number of shots. So I ended up upping the ISO quite a bit to compensate for that. So the answer to the question, despite the challenges, is it worth heading onto the continent of Antarctica with a camping trip to take photos with a tripod? Of course it is. You get to shoot in a pristine environment, surrounded by wildlife, and it's just an incredible experience. I am just about to go to bed though, so I'll answer this question again in the morning. Probably depends on how much sleep I get, whether the answer is negative or positive. Well, good morning. I think I must have got a whole 20 minutes of sleep last night. But was it worth it for taking a few photos on Antarctica? Absolutely. I got to sleep next to these seals. I had about 3 penguins just over here on the ice, maybe 5 meters from me. And the ice was shearing in the middle of the bay. The ship left us during the night as well, so we were completely alone here. It was so quiet. Absolutely amazing.
Camping on Antarctica was an amazing experience, and I would thoroughly recommend it. The silence was quite amazing, punctuated as it was by the sounds of shearing ice, the chatter of penguins, and the occasional whale groaning in the bay. We were glad though to return to ship to warm up and dry out our camping gear. Most of the images that I took are nothing special. I spent quite a time on these whale bones, but there is not enough tonal separation to make them stand out from the background in the way that I had imagined. I also took some shots down by the water's edge, but the composition is imbalanced. On the other hand, my final subject did meet my expectations. I like almost everything about this shot. There is rhythm in the placement of the whale vertebrae and flow in the white between them, and the sweep of the darker rock in the left takes your eyes towards the penguins in the midground. If I was being too picky, perhaps the mountain ridge could have been a bit more of an interesting shape. I focus stacked this final picture for sharpness throughout the frame, and I chose a midground shot where the penguins were in their most interesting postures. As I had settled on this composition late, I had to do a little bit of cloning in the snow to remove 2 boot prints. Overall though, I am happy with this photo. Indeed, it's safe to say that this shoot alone would have made the whole trip worthwhile. Time. When you're looking forward to something, minutes drag and seem to span hours. But then that special event arrives, only to vanish in the rearview mirror, in the moment you took to pinch yourself or rub your eyes. The next few days were nothing short of spectacular. Playful seals bobbed around our zodiacs, penguins porpoise within arm's reach of my tripod, and close encounters with whales became normal. Eventually I stopped obsessing about getting a still photograph, and I just enjoyed the experiences. By this point, we were about halfway through our adventure. The blue skies that I had been cursing made way for thick sheet cloud, and the high, overcast, diffuse lighting continued as we made our first landing on the continent of Antarctica proper. Of course, I couldn't resist the lure of long exposure photography, so I packed up my tripods ready to explore these new shores.
How long have we got?
I don't know.
Time to have a wander up and do the other thing. Yeah, well, I'm definitely going in the zodiac.
Yeah. Did you bring your telephone out?
No.
Doesn't matter, I mean, if they're close enough, it'll be a good footage. They'll be close enough with the footage.
Yeah, well, that's what I figure as well.
So this is our first time touching down on the Antarctic continent proper. So far we've just been island hopping off the continent, but this is the first continental landing that we've done. And because this place isn't a risk for avian influenza, we're allowed to put our bags down and it's much easier shooting conditions. We are restricted about where we can go though, and I've been picking my way along the shore here, finding icebergs, or mini chunks of ice really, that have become lodged on the shore and so don't get buffeted too much when the waves come in. Even so, I'm not able to set up my preferred ultra-long exposures of 2 minutes plus, and I'm keeping the exposures to about 6 seconds. Photographic challenges aside, it is difficult shooting here. The expedition team set up flags that you can walk between, and you're very limited as to where you can go for obvious reasons, because safety is of paramount importance when you're this far from any cities and rescue. Compounding that though is my mind state. I'm finding it really hard to focus on landscape photography because there's always something better going on a little bit further away from you. The wildlife is so abundant. You'll have whales breaching the surface, you'll have penguins, you'll have seals. It's very hard to focus on any one thing. Landings are also severely time limited. You have max an hour and a half, and my time here is almost up. So I'm going to go on a Zodiac cruise and try and find some wildlife.
Forget fear of missing out. On a trip like this, you will miss out. Constantly. News of humpback whales breaching in the bay was distracting, but I was having so much fun focusing on my rocks and icebergs that I decided to give the Zodiac safari a miss, and have a bit more of a wander around the ice where we had landed.
Antarctic continent? A check.
I saw another composition while we were in the queue for the Zodiac back to the ship. I barely had time to compose for the still image, let alone shoot any behind-the-scenes footage of me taking the shot. And in my rush I also managed to ding myself on my tripod as I was closing it. Trying to make this scene work, I took the Goldilocks approach. The first frame was too far from the foreground rocks, the second was too close, but the third was just right. Unfortunately, by the time I had worked out this composition, I was not paying enough attention. I found the balance where the boulders remain prominent enough so you can make out their interesting details, while still preserving enough presence in the wider vista and the iceberg on the horizon. But, with this balance achieved, I forgot to take a frame with a neutral density filter to smooth out the ripples. Perhaps I am too attached to long exposure landscape photography, and maybe this image does work with a faster shutter speed. The water is not too choppy, and it does not interrupt your eye's path through the elements, and in fact I got lucky with the timing of a wave. I do like the smooth effect on the foreground water in this tighter framed image, but I did have to time blend, and introduce a frame for the horizon iceberg that was shot at a faster shutter speed than the rest of the image. While I like this condensed vision of the scene, I can't help thinking that the tighter framing fails to get across the turtle shell character of the rocks. I'm pleased with the first composition from this landing, but for different reasons. I like that the subject is more clearly ice, and I like that it contains both dynamism and stillness. The smaller fragment lodged on the shore in the foreground stayed still enough to make it sharp, but then this contrasts with the motion blur as you move further into the image, before again the static sharpness returns in the faraway iceberg. The mid-ground rocks are not as attention-grabbing as the ones that are shaped like sea turtles. However, when you inspect them closely, they have some lovely texture and colour. And of course I like that the frequency of the water is smoothed out by a long exposure, and that your eye barely rests as its skim reads the scene. Whether or not you should bother bringing a tripod with you to Antarctica is a very personal thing. I'm someone who can ignore beautiful sunset cloud colour from a grand vista if I'm working on a more compressed composition. But even if you are comfortable giving up the spectacular for softer scenes, doing so in an environment like this is tough. There is always something more interesting than landscape photography going on around you, and it might be much more sensible not to force things and just go with the flow. Indeed, if I did another expedition cruise, while I would still bring a tripod, I'm not sure that it is all that necessary, and it may be more sensible to treat a visit to Antarctica as a wildlife safari and have a 70-200 fixed permanently to your camera body. All that being said, if you are making a journey to this spectacular place, you might be better off just enjoying the experience and doing some filming on your phone. The best footage of whales that anyone took was done on an iPhone while I was busy with my rocks during this last landing. I think you need to be a little philosophical on any group tour like this, let alone one with so much build-up. Rather than trying to emulate the experiences and photos of others, it is probably better not to worry too much about cameras and gear, and just enjoy what's in front of you. Whatever you may expect to see on an adventure such as this, the expedition team base your itinerary on weather conditions, and no one visit to Antarctica will ever be the same as the last. While the vast landscapes of Antarctica obsessed me while I was there, it is the close encounters with the wildlife, and the people I got to spend time with during those encounters that have really stuck with me. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.